There's a quiet moment in the house late at night. The dishes are done, the lights are dimmed, and the gentle hum of the refrigerator is the only sound. A parent sits in the living room, staring out the window at the street lights flickering on one by one. They think back to their own childhood, that strange stretch of time when freedom came wrapped in the silence of an empty house. They were told to be outside until the streetlights came on, then come home. It was simple, yet there was an absence woven into those instructions, not just of supervision, but of presence. And now, here they are, the parents themselves, deeply involved in every rhythm of their children's lives. There is something paradoxical about that, a tension born out of a mixture of longing and newfound responsibility. This video is for those who grew up in that quiet, independent way and now find themselves caught between wanting to provide what was missing and navigating a world that looks so different from the one they knew. It is for those who sometimes wonder if their way of parenting is too involved or not involved enough, but who, above all, care deeply. If this resonates with you, stay here for a while as we slowly explore these currents, gently unfolding what it means to be a Gen X parent today. If you find the conversation meaningful, consider allowing this space to become part of your reflection by subscribing, quietly and without fuss. One deeply held belief that often accompanies Gen X parenting is that independence is the highest gift you can give your child. After all, you remember well how it felt to hold your own keys, to walk home with few questions asked, to quietly solve your problems because no one else was around. That belief, that independence equals strength, makes perfect emotional sense. It is not just a lesson, but an armor forged from an upbringing where emotional self-sufficiency was not a choice, but a necessity. You learned early that the world would not shield you from every struggle, so you became your own protector. Yet what nobody talks about is how that independence, while seeming strong on the surface, often carried an undertow of solitude. The silent house was not just quiet, it was lonesome in a way that left its mark. Growing up with limited emotional nurture shaped an inner landscape that now quietly shapes how you show up for your own children. When you step back and watch your child navigate a challenge, the urge to jump in and protect clashes with the ingrained sense that they need to find their own path. The reframe here is gentle but profound. Your desire to protect, to be present, is less about control and more about forgiveness, an attempt to give to your children what you wished you had. Psychologically, this tension reflects two core human needs: autonomy and attachment. The brain craves connection, but also the space to explore. For Gen X parents, the neurological wiring is unique. You learn to self-regulate early, to manage emotions in private, often because there was no one else around to mirror your feelings. This makes emotional availability a tender, sometimes elusive goal. You are working to soften the emotional distance that once served as a shield, not realizing that embracing vulnerability takes both courage and patience. Imagine parenting as walking alongside your child in a dense forest. When you were a child in that forest, you walked alone most of the time, forging your own narrow trail between the trees. You learned to notice the subtle dangers, the safe clearings, the quiet paths that others missed. Now, as a parent, you carry a lantern while walking beside your child. Your light is steady but not blinding. You want to illuminate the way without forcing their steps. Sometimes they stumble, and you reach out a hand, but you don't pull them out of the woods. The metaphor revisits this image later, a reminder that presence is balance between holding the lantern and letting the child trailblaze their own route. Another common belief among Gen X parents is that being involved must mean hovering, checking in at every moment, controlling outcomes to prevent failure or pain. Now, you might be thinking that this is exactly the kind of parenting others accuse Gen Zers of, but there is more nuance here. What nobody talks about is the way Gen X parents have been called stealth fighter parents, quiet but fiercely protective when a situation truly demands it. This style is different from helicopter parenting. It is a measured presence, watching from a slight distance, but ready to engage with surprising intensity if a boundary is crossed or a serious issue arises. This approach makes emotional sense because it mirrors your own experience. You are largely left on your own, but when necessary, you stepped up for yourself with a fierce resolve. You're passing on that blend of self-reliance coupled with selective, powerful intervention. It is important to see this not as inconsistency, but as a thoughtfully calibrated response rooted in your own history of having to figure it out alone. Except now, you try not to let your child feel that isolation. The reframe here is that your style is not neglect or overprotection, but a careful dance between freedom and security. One vivid moment illustrating this comes from a day at a middle school event. A Gen X parent watches from across the room, arms folded, not chasing every move their child makes. Other parents hover, voices loud with warnings or overt attentiveness. But when a conflict breaks out, this parent moves swiftly with quiet authority and fierce focus, stepping confidently into the fray. The child feels seen and defended, not smothered. This story reveals a complex layering of involvement. There is space for independence most of the time, but a readiness to assert boundaries decisively when needed. There is also an unspoken distinction between comfort and avoidance in the way Gen X parents sometimes hold back emotionally. Comfort might look like allowing a child to speak openly, sharing feelings in a warm environment. Avoidance, on the other hand, is masking emotions, brushing over difficult topics to maintain peace. The line between these can be blurry, but it matters. Many Gen X parents wrestle with this, unconsciously replicating the emotional distancing they experienced, but not wanting to. Recognizing this nuance is not about judgment, but about quiet awareness, allowing room for reflection on where emotional shielding is protective and where it might unintentionally create barriers. When you step back, it becomes clear that these patterns are not personal failings, but responses to larger systemic shifts. The world your parents knew, their workplace stability, social structures, even childhood freedoms, has changed dramatically. This has shaped a generation's approach to parenting in ways that reflect economic uncertainty, shifting cultural expectations, and technological upheaval. Gen X parents live in a societal crossfire, squeezed between earlier generations who emphasize tradition and younger generations who navigate digital realities with intuitiveness you did not have. Understanding this context shifts the conversation from blame to empathy and broadens the lens through which you see yourself as a parent. Reflecting on these dynamics leads to thoughtful questions rather than prescriptions. What parts of your own upbringing are you choosing to honor, and which are you quietly letting go? How does your experience shape your understanding of presence and autonomy? Where do you notice your own memories influencing your responses, even when those memories are uncomfortable? These questions encourage a pause, a moment to sit with your complexity without rushing to fix or defend. A particularly freeing reframe is this: you are less a perfect parent and more a witness to your own journey. The mistakes you make are not proof of failure, but part of a larger unfolding story of growth. You carry lessons, pain, and hope all intertwined, parenting with an internal compass sharpened by your own childhood shadows and light. This reframing invites gentleness toward yourself, a recognition that doing your best in an unpredictable world is a profound act of courage. What nobody talks about is how Gen X parents grapple with the digital landscape as a terrain foreign to their youth but native to their children. You experienced a world where boredom required inventiveness and presence was undistracted by screens. What you feel about technology is layered, comfortable enough to use it, yet wary of its encroaching reach into privacy and emotional space. This ambivalence shapes how you set boundaries around screen time, social media, and digital exposure. Unlike some, your skepticism is not fear-based, but informed by lived experience, a desire to protect something that feels precious, undiluted connection. Returning to our earlier metaphor of the forest, technology is like an ever-expanding thicket growing wild between the trees. You must decide when to clear a path and when to let the brambles stand. This balancing act is ongoing, reflecting your dual identity as someone who remembers a world before and someone guiding a child through the world now. Your caution deepens your presence, not diminishes it. Gen X parenting, in its complex dance, often appears emotionally exhausting. Managing career pressures, caring for aging parents, nurturing children, all amid financial and social uncertainties, layers responsibility in ways seldom acknowledged. You exist in a sandwich of expectations. Older generations may see you as too soft, younger ones as too strict, and you're left negotiating the space between. This space is precarious but filled with intention. It is a world where your parenting reflects a quiet insistence on resilience, paired with a newly cultivated emotional availability. In these moments, it's worth pausing to consider. What does it mean to be present in a way that honors both protection and independence? How do you carry the wisdom of your past without being trapped by its limitations? Where might compassion for yourself open new pathways for connection with your children? These reflections encourage a shift from judgment to curiosity, from self-criticism to self-understanding. One last thing to hold on to is the idea that the parenting journey is not about achieving perfection or external approval. Gen X parents often distrust external validation, steeped as they are in experiences that taught them resilience comes from within. They parent not to meet a public standard, but to respond to what feels authentic to their own histories and hopes. This internal calibration allows room for imperfection, for multiple mistakes, for repetitive lessons, all cushioned by a steadfast commitment to show up, to listen, and to keep trying. So if you find yourself caught between wanting to protect fiercely and needing to let go tenderly, between returning to silence and breaking it with presence, know that you are part of a quiet revolution. Gen X parents are reshaping what it means to love and guide in a world that often feels uncharted. And in that unfolding story, your struggles and strengths both belong, woven together like the intricate paths in a forest illuminated by a gentle, steady lantern. Thank you for allowing this space for reflection. If you have found some resonance here, please consider quietly joining this community by subscribing. Together, we are crafting a conversation that honors the depth and complexity of parenting without hurry or judgment.